I'm going to ask Ms. Anaya to read the Open Public Meetings Act statement, please.
On Thursday, January 14th, 2021, notice of this meeting was mailed to the press and the Current of Egg Harbor Township. Notice was also delivered that day to the Egg Harbor Township Clerk and posted on the bulletin board in Township Hall. Advertised instructions for this hybrid meeting were posted on our website and on social media on Friday, January 15th.
Thank you. May we have roll call?
Ms. Alabarda?
Here.
Please use your microphones for
Here.
student. Thank you. Mrs. Byrd?
Here.
Mr. Della Barca?
Here.
Mr. Ireland?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Mr. Price is here.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Here.
Mrs. Salagi?
Here.
Mrs. Gilbert Floyd?
Here.
And Mr. Castellano.
Here. Okay, may I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
Motion made. Second.
All in favor? Raise our hands. We are now in executive. Our meeting back to order. And once again, ask Ms. Anaya to read the Open Public Meetings Act statement, please.
On Thursday, January 14th, 2021, notice of this meeting was mailed to the press and the Current of Egg Harbor Township. Notice was also delivered that day to the Egg Harbor Township Clerk and posted on the bulletin board in Township Hall. Advertised instructions for this hybrid meeting were posted on our website and on social media on Friday, January 15th, 2021.
Thank you. May we have roll call, please?
Ms. Alabarda? Here. Mrs. Byrd?
Here.
Thank you. Via telephone, Mr. Della Barca?
Here.
Thank you. Via telephone, Mr. Ireland?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Mr. Price is here.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Here.
Mrs. Salagi?
Here.
Mrs. Gilbert Floyd?
Here.
And Mr. Castellano.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can all please stand for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our January work session meeting, which also happens to be, today was our first day for in-person learning again in 2021. So welcome back, students, teachers, and staff. We're glad to have you. Of course, we understand that there are mixed emotions right now. We all see the light at the end of the tunnel of this awful worldwide pandemic. We know the vaccines are literally on the way and other things, but they're not quite here yet. So we still have a little bit of a rough patch to go through, and I'm going to once again ask that we all work together, come together for just a little while longer till we get through to the end. I'm convinced that 2021 is going to be the year schools are back to normal, and it will be sooner rather than later. Before I turn it over to Dr. Gruccio, just a few quick things that I want to share. My first year on the board was 2001. Seems like just yesterday, but a couple years ago. Of course, we all remember that year for September 11th, but from the educational standpoint, at that time, when I was preparing in 2000 and 2001 to come on the board, the thing that took place that changed the landscape was Columbine. As we all remember, a terrible tragedy threatened and took the lives and injured students and staff members at a school in Colorado in 1999. And what that did for all of us who were leaders in the education community, it made us realize so vividly that we have two top equally important priorities in the education business. One, of course, is learning and student achievement, but in tandem with that priority is safety. And right now, what we're dealing with in this worldwide pandemic, like nothing we've ever seen before, is having the responsibility to keep our students, our staff, their teachers, family and loved ones who are at home, healthy and safe and secure. So as I thought back, that moment in time, it's come full circle till today. We have that responsibility. Last spring, when this pandemic came upon us in March, the governor ordered all schools virtual. And we complied, and we went virtual. For the fall, the decision was left to individual districts. However, for public schools, it had to be in accordance with strict guidelines called the Road Back to School Plan. That plan required that if districts were able, that they offer some in-person instruction, but yet still follow all federal, state, and county guidelines and submit a Road Back to School plan to the county superintendent that said we would meet all those guidelines, most importantly, including social distancing within the buildings. And as a large district, that remains a challenge for us that other districts do not have. We submitted a plan with input from a wide variety of stakeholders. Over 800 people participated. We had parents, we had students, we had teachers and staff and community members, and we put a good plan in place. We put a plan in place for hybrid learning, which allows for some in-person learning, some virtual learning, in combination. It allows our students to learn, while at the same time, it allows us to do that secondary prime mission that we need to fulfill, which is to keep everyone in this building, when they're on our watch, students and staff alike, safe and healthy. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Gruccio to update us on where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano, and good evening and Happy New Year to all. I will begin with the words of the great Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. As we are all aware, today was our first day back to in-person teaching and learning. And as you know, we closed our schools and moved to the all-virtual teaching and learning as of late November. As we look to embrace, engage, and educate our students, I encouraged all today to stay positive and do the best you can in serving all students. As our schools resume operations for in-person instruction, our most recent data collection shows us that 59.6% of our students wish to return to in-person instruction and 40.4% wish to learn virtually. 2021 began with a return to the school buildings 2 weeks beyond January 4th. This time was a time for staff and students to have adequate time to quarantine from any holiday gatherings or travel that occurred over the holiday break so that they could attend work or school today, January 19th. I have reminded parents, staff, and students the importance of adhering to our Road Back to School plan of hybrid instruction, which includes a broad community commitment to adhere to a daily health check screenings, not attending school if one feels anything but well, practicing social distancing, the wearing of masks at all times, disinfection of personal spaces, avoiding gathering, hand washing, and sanitizing. While COVID-19 cases may have gone up as expected in our county, our district cases are down by approximately 10. We saw a spike in our dashboard because of winter break. Our data staff returned in January and had to address cases that reported over the holiday break through the COVID-19 hotline. Like most schools, we have returned to our buildings knowingly that our safety protocols are in place to protect all. I am confident that our protocols are just as safe, if not safer, as those like Wawa, Walgreens, Walmart, ShopRite, Starbucks, restaurants, the mall, and even a ski resort, to name a few. Like in October, our schools have resumed operations aligned to the Road Back to School plan that was submitted and approved by the New Jersey Department of Education in accordance with the executive orders, guidance from the CDC, the New Jersey Department of Health, the Atlantic County Superintendent, and the Atlantic County Department of Public Health. These entities have provided recommendations not meant to replace state, local health and safety laws, rules, regulations in which public schools must comply. Executive Order 175 clearly states that school districts must meet health and safety standards in the New Jersey Department of Education checklist for reopening schools for the 2021 school year. We proudly collaborated, as Mr. Castellano said earlier, as a school community in July 2020 with over 800 participants and served over 11 committees. From operations to scheduling to health and safety technology, facilities, we covered it all. We came together on July 28th to review the findings in a 5-hour meeting, collectively shared ideas that led to a full district plan that was submitted to the state for approval 30 days prior to the start of our school year. There's a PowerPoint of this meeting. It's posted on our website, as well as a repository of question and answers that were birthed from this collective process. And at the request of Mr. Castellano and the Board of Education, these questions and answers were posted on our website. The following were addressed, but I will address again for some community concerns. 1, our process included anyone from the school community who wanted to join us, and this was all advertised. Our meetings were advertised on social media and our website and announced at board meetings. 2, the district made the decision with community stakeholders this summer to open school under the Road Back to School plan by physically social distancing students as a best practice recommended by the state. We decided that the best route for us to follow to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our students and staff was social distancing to the best extent practicable and the wearing of masks, which was mandated. Coupled with cleaning and sanitizing of our classrooms and buses, we followed square footage requirements for each of our classrooms based on facility efficiency standards. Net square footage per occupant based on the 6-foot radius of space around each occupant. Each principal, along with their custodial staff, took measures to go into classrooms, measure desks and spaces, and utilize the net square footage to determine the number of occupants that could occupy each classroom. The net square footage also includes allocations for desks, circulation space, loose furniture, and equipment. Also taking into account that every classroom in district is of different sizes, as well as the size of our students as they grow from grades K through 12. 3, capacity restraints affected us more so than smaller schools in the area. To best provide in-person instruction, while not 5 days per week, we had to cut our population in half and offer a hybrid model to students. This hybrid model consisted of synchronous learning opportunities for all students, which means all students see all their teachers each and every day at the same time. If you remember correctly, back in the summer, we were awaiting clarity on guidance because Governor Murphy made a statement that 25% capacity restriction would be in place for indoor spaces. At that point, we did not know if that affected schools or not, so we planned even further. And when we did this planning, we found out that we can only bring in students 1 day per week. Since it did not apply to schools, as we found out weeks later, we stuck to our hybrid model of 50%. Maybe one could relate, as if I speak to New Jersey restaurants who have to adhere to indoor dining capacity restrictions still at this time. 4, an important fact to know is that while in a hybrid in-person and virtual model, we need to hold seats for students who have elected to learn in person while still abiding to the physical distancing of all students. We are continuously reviewing data to see if we can increase in-person time while still following the Road Back to School plan. While we spent this week preparing for the reopening of our schools, we are researching and looking at data regarding increased in-person learning. 5, we discussed desk shields / barriers. We had the conversation on July 28th in that 5-hour meeting, as noted in the PowerPoint slides 33 and 35. Our Board of Education once again notified of our research in an October committee meetings and again on October 13th at the board meeting, where Mr. Santilli shared the research 1 hour 24 seconds into that meeting, to be exact. In addition, the Department of Health has said that masks and/or barriers do not preclude an individual from being identified as a close contact to a COVID-19 case. They are not substitutes for social distancing. Again, it was agreed upon that our plan for social distancing to the greatest extent practicable is what would apply to the Egg Harbor Township School District. 6, we are a public school district. We are not a private or parochial school district, which is dependent on student tuition to stay open. We are a public school district and are required to follow the Road Back to School guidance and best practices. I have confirmed with the Executive County Superintendent, who said non-public schools do not have to follow the Road Back to School. 7, we've been asked about surveys. Yes, we have surveyed. We've surveyed since July at different times. Mr. Trump and Donald Duck responded to many of our surveys, as well as parents of same students with different answers. Therefore, with the most recent return to school, we decided to follow our policy regarding switching from virtual to in-person instruction and contacted parents directly for specific instructions for their needed changes. To date, 59.6% of students requested in-person, and again, 40.4% requesting virtual instruction. 8, lastly on this topic, every educator in the state, including me, would love for us to be back to normal with students in our schools 5 days per week. I stated then, and I'll state now, and when I mean then, is previously at board meetings, and also we had a parent meeting where I was asked this question. We are researching ways to expand in-person learning. However, due to our size and the capacity restrictions on size, it is not an easy fix. I also am focused on the executive order, the Road Back to School guidance, to see if down the road it will change. That is where, and I've been quoted, "we'll see," but please finish your quote, comes in and should be completed with, "we will see what happens with the guidance from the governor and the guidance from the Department of Education regarding the Road Back to School. And if there's any changes, as these changes will certainly help our ideas and plans come alive." 9, we are also in the midst of creating a special education plan. The special education director has a plan for his department for the remaining of the school year and supplemental summer programs. He will be presenting this information on January 26th at a board meeting and will share the details on programs and plans. I know that our child study teams are handling each student on an individual basis regarding time lost for related services. Mr. Dorso and his supervisors also have individual parent meetings weekly to be sure communications are fluid. Beyond our special education population is the gen ed population, where we know that learning delay could have occurred. We have a couple of things in motion here. 1, our teachers are in tune with our data cycles where students' performance at each grade level is analyzed. We took a laser-like focus on at students who did well prior to closure and who are now not doing as well as kids as they would have. We also look at the kids who historically struggle. We take this data through our RTI process and we address each student at every grade level. Teachers now know to adapt teaching to student needs. I am confident that our teachers are in tune with student performance through the PLC process and the RTI process as we address needs. 2, later in our finance report this evening, I will have Mr. Santilli speak to a learning loss grant that he and Ms. Lily Moss have worked endless hours on, as well as a plan that we, the Egg Harbor Township School District Administration, will be proposing to the Board of Education through the budget process to address learning delays that any student may have. So let's stay tuned for that. I will end with, we are #EHT strong. Mr. Castellano, as you can hear, we have a lot going on. I felt it was important to update everyone on some of the concerns that we've been dealing with, and hopefully that provided answers and clarity. At this time, If anyone has any questions, I'll take the questions before we move on to our presentation.
Okay. Seeing none, but I do want to thank you, Dr. Gruccio, for your clarity and thoroughness and just recapping all the work, all the effort that's gone into our road back plan that got us to where we are today. And of course, thank you and your team for your effort, all of our staff, all of our teachers, all the great work that you're doing every day to get us here where we are today. And again, we need to just keep working together and we're going to get through this. Go ahead, Mrs.
That's right, it's all about teamwork. Thank you.
I just wanted to say before we get into the presentations, I guess from what you just shared with us, I just think that, I don't know if the public or anyone thinks that this was an easy decision to open up today. I know for me, it was one of those back and forth kind of situations where we know that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And at the same time, we know, it's part of me once our schools open and know that that's what's best for children and what they need. But then there's the other part where you think of the staff and students and, the possible exposure or just their overall safety, health, and well-being. And I think you have laid out pretty clear the effort that's gone into making this huge decision. And it is a struggle. I think anyone with children, without children, just a human being would know that this is not, I don't think this is an easy decision or a choice for a district of our size to make, and as I said this to Dr. Gruccio before, if in the event that things, for whatever reason, become unsafe, that I know we'll take the needed precautions to do what we need to do, whether that's remaining open or whether that's closing down for any period of time. Because my number one thing is the safety and the well-being of the staff and the students is really at the forefront of for me, for just the decisions. And I'm proud to be part of the Board of Education that sat down and also the staff. I'm really proud of all of you for the time and effort I know that you will put in that probably behind the scenes that people don't know about. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Very good. All right, let's go on ahead then with our superintendent's report.
Okay, so this evening, getting to this time of the year budgeting process, we'd like to highlight our different departments. So this evening we have two super directors here with us to share information on their department. So it looks like facilities is up there first. A little switcheroo on the agenda, but we have Mr. Tim Brunetta here, who is going to share an update on facilities. Mr. Brunetta.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to see you all in person and healthy. I've been asked to be brief, so I'm going to move pretty quickly, but I'd like to provide a snapshot of what's going on or what has been going on with the facilities department since I last spoke with you last year. Some of you know this information, but for the new members of the board, I'd like to just quickly go over. The facilities department consists of approximately 113 employees, 3 of which are supervisors, 2 secretarial, 80 custodians. We have 12 substitutes on top of that, 9 maintenance men, some of which are licensed HVAC, as well as licensed plumbers, and I have 7 groundsmen. Give you an idea of what we take care of, that group of people. We have approximately 1.3 million square feet of schools in the district, and you can see there listed out at all of our schools and the years they were built and when there were additions. Now you can see we go back as far as 1914 with Eagle Academy. Am I not close enough? Sorry about that.
There are some that are listening in via telephone, so the microphones are important. Sorry. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. You'll see Eagle Academy was built in 1914. That's our oldest building. And I think the most recent beyond that was an addition to the high school in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. But In any case, the idea is we're taking care of an awful lot of buildings, an awful lot of square feet. Now, understanding that the information I'm going to share on this slide is about, look at it through the lens of COVID. The facilities department, with the exception of a couple of weeks since we shut down last year, we have had staff on site every day, working, completing work orders, completing projects, and doing things. And in that time, we have completed, even with the reduced, with people not even being present other than our staff, we completed approximately 8,600 work orders. 3,400 were submitted by staff. 5,100 were preventative maintenance to keep our stuff running, equipment running. In terms of use of facilities requests, that was a much lower number than previous years just because of the shutdown, but we still did approximately 2,900 use of facilities requests, 2,100 in-house and 860 from outside requests. And by carrying out specific work in district during the closure, we saved the district approximately almost $500,000, $445,000 by doing a build-out of the Davenport new main office area. We conducted that in-house. Over the past year, 2019 to 2020, and I won't go over this entire list, but if you look up at your screen, I'll give you a moment. If you can look at it, these are the things that we accomplished in the last year, whether they be by outside contractors or whether we carried them out in-house. We have approximately 20 projects here that were carried out while the district was closed most of the time. Coming this year, what I hope to accomplish in the next 12 months are the projects that you see listed here. Some of these items, again, as you look up on the screen, are items that the Finance and Ops Committee, as well as the full board, has looked at and heard of before, many of them. But these are things that I'm trying to get taken care of in the next 12 months. Now, very shortly, as was discussed by Dr. Gruccio, you're going to be seeing our budget requests, mine, of course, included. And just to quickly go over what you're going to see included in my budget are the following things. Obviously, there are some fixed things. There are things that occur every year. These are things that I call fixed items. Inspections, regular maintenance things that happen every year as a routine basis. Sprinkler inspections, fire extinguishers, things of that nature. Those costs are included. I also have building requests. Now, these are specific requests that are made by building principals where they want to do repairs or enhancements or changes to their building. They basically submit their requests to me every year. I come up with the figures and things that what I believe it'll take to get those things done, and they're also included. I have a couple of years back, I began a 25-year replacement plan for all equipment in the entire district. That includes vehicles, grounds equipment, things of that nature, and a replacement plan to keep those things constantly updated over a course of 25 years, and then of course it starts all over again. But it allows us to be on top of and replace the equipment as it's needed for its useful life. This also is included with HVAC, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Roofing, we've got to keep on top of roofing issues and keeping that worked out in the same way. Concrete and asphalt repairs, trying to prevent trip hazards and things of that nature. And of course, lines and signs, parking lots and signage and things of that nature. But you'll find all of those things are included in the budget you're going to be hearing about soon in the coming weeks. Now, this is something you've looked at last year. This is something I've talked about last year, and this is something that I'm very concerned about. I don't know how to stress that more. We have approximately, well, not approximately, exactly, 662 large pieces of HVAC equipment in this district. And if you look up at this slide and you see the age of these pieces of equipment, this is a looming, large, very expensive issue. I won't even pretend to understand the financial instrument that might be necessary to tackle this, but I just want to bring to your attention that this is something that is looming. You'll see that, and it's illustrated in red there, that we have 31% of just those large pieces of equipment are 20 years old or older. Now, the useful life of a piece of equipment is 20 to 25 years, but we actually, that 31% is all encompassing. There's actually units that are included in that 31% that are near 40 years old right now. So, and I think I gave this example last year as well. You know, think about yourself when you buy a piece of equipment for your home. You buy a refrigerator, you buy a washing machine, things of that nature, and it gives you a 3-year warranty. When does it die? 3 years and 2 months after you bought it. They're designed to last a certain period of time, and then they're going to start failing. Now, I have a very, very good staff that performs preventative maintenance on these units all the time. But there is a limit to what preventative maintenance can do and how long it can carry this stuff forward. So we're doing our best to try and keep this stuff alive, but my strong recommendation to the board is we need to really start considering how we're going to start replacing this equipment out and getting us up to speed. I don't lay blame on any previous boards. I don't lay any previous blame on any directors prior to me. I don't know what information was shared with those boards, but I want you to understand this is the condition we're in, and I strongly recommend we do something about it, if possible. Another area of immediate need, something that we've got to really look at, is roof section replacement. Again, I basically took the roof, and you'll see this in the budget. I took the roof sections of the district. I broke it apart. It's approximately 35 workable roof areas district-wide, and I developed a plan to try and replace them over a period of time so that, again, we could be in the same situation. Over a 25-year period, we could systematically cycle out and replace the roof sections as we go. Now, this is expensive. I wouldn't say as expensive as the HVA piece. However, there's also compounding factors when it comes to this issue. The example that I give you, and you'll see up on your screen there now, is Slayville Elementary. Now you can see that roof, I've divided it down into approximately 4 sections that are workable sections. They're kind of an average size of what you would do with a roof job. But if you look at the image, you'll see the compounding issue right away. One, you have conventional roof, which is like a shingle roof like your home. You have some sections that are flat roof sections, but you have solar all over it. So it really isn't just the issue of the roof. It's a question of removing that solar, taking care of the roof section we're dealing with, and then replacing that solar. And while it's down, we are losing generation. So it's one of those things that there's a lot of pieces to these things that have to be coordinated. And but it's something we need to look at because this is district-wide. This is just one example, but this is across the whole district. We've got to be on top of this. Now, big picture thinking 3 to 5 years of things that I would like to see move forward and continue moving forward. I'll make a reference to the sports fields over at the high school. We have kind of a larger master plan that we've been working from, and we've knocked out a few things on our list, but I'd like to see that move forward and continue moving forward. And it isn't just about aesthetics. These are also infrastructure issues. I'll give you an example of irrigation at the high school. It's original to the building. That's 1982. So we're to a point now that we have breakages, we have things happening, and it's just a matter of time. It's like everything else. With age, it's problems. It's proper drainage. We just replaced the track in the field. A big issue there, and why we had a track failure originally, was because the water that was collecting at the base of the track. Now, we did install a drain, but that really isn't the proper way to really, truly address the runoff from these areas. So proper grading, proper drainage, irrigation, things of that nature, and then on top of that, repositioning of the fields, giving every sport their own area. So we're not constantly reusing the same turf areas over and over, where the fields are getting overworked, they have no time to rest, so it becomes extremely difficult to grow grass. The earth becomes compacted, it's very hard to get stuff to grow, because that ends up being a safe playing field for the athletes. You know, the famous, or the buzzwords within the industry are, you know, they're ankle breakers or ankle turners. You know, just a little patch of missing grass here or there, things that go on, is where that student will turn, that athlete will turn and twist, and boom, there we go, broken ankle. So those are things we're always trying to avoid, but all of these things collectively all add toward that. And additionally, we have some space off of the D-wing lot that we talked about and have theorized about. We could actually fit 5 additional fields in that area. Now, we did use it this year because the football team needed extra place with our social distancing, and we did have an area lined for them to use, but it really wasn't proper. The field, the area wasn't great, and things aren't nice, and it worked as a temporary measure, but we also have a plan possibly to expand the sports fields there, which again would give every sport their own area, and everybody takes care of their own area, gives them a sense of ownership and pride, as well as the other issues that I discussed. Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead, Patrick.
Hello, I just have a couple quick questions. How many HVAC equipment that will require a crane for replacement?
Oh, boy. Well, I can't answer that question specifically, but I can tell you the high school alone has 58 rooftop units. That's just the high school. Now, one of the difficulties with the high school is this. You saw from one of the earlier slides where it talked about original construction and then additions. Well, there are units that are on the high school that are of such a size, and they're positioned now that the building's been built beyond that a crane can't even reach. So we literally are in a place where you have to helicopter in units or devise some way of getting these things to the roof because it's just physically too far from the exterior of the building to get them in. And these are very large units. There are units there that are the size of that table. There are units that are the size of a tractor trailer. But there's, just on the high school alone, there are 58 units.
So my second question is, last year I was sitting in the audience when you gave a brief about the same thing about the 662. So were any replaced this year?
There were a couple due to failure that were replaced. But in terms of a master plan, because there has to be, it's also economies of scale. It just makes sense to do things in larger numbers because we have better pricing that way. But the dedicated resources, the master plan, the engineering that's going to have to go into effect, it's going to have to be a project-based initiative. Again, a couple were replaced just because of failure, but there's got to be some larger plan that when a decision is made of how we're going to approach this, if we're going to knock out a certain number every year or what it's going to take. But I think that's the best way to handle it.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative.
Sure.
So when I was sitting here, I was just thinking about, as far as when you said a master plan,
Yes.
and I know you said it was a building from 1914, which was Eagle Academy.
Eagle's the oldest school, yes.
Even with the age of the buildings, what building would you say is?
The worst?
Well, I would say which one would you maybe intend to put on the top of your list?
Well,
That's
I'm
what I was.
concerned, I'm
yeah.
concerned with the answer to this with regard to liability. I will just say the ages of the buildings are there, they are safe now. And I think
Okay.
we have to come up with a plan on what the next steps would be in order to make sure we have
The
addressed,
maintenance?
right, the roofs and the HVACs. I just want to be careful with that.
I think I can answer that
Okay.
without, I think I can
Okay.
answer that without.
I mean, in your master plan, which one
It
would you
actually
wanna
varies.
address?
There is no one building. In other words,
Okay.
because the buildings were built and then added on to different years, their systems are even different in age. So there's spots on different buildings where the units are aged differently. In terms of an approach, I mean, my recommendation would be, and I have this information available on a spreadsheet, but, what are the oldest? Now, there's no way of knowing exactly which unit would fail first.
Gotcha.
An older unit might just keep running, and a younger one might die. But the reality is we would probably just try to attack the oldest stuff first, start cycling in that, and then move our way backward. But there's such a number of systems, years.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, depending on the resources that are put to it, this could be years and years to get this to cycle through. And quite frankly, by the time you get to the end of it, it might be time to start over again.
Got it. 'Cause
There's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of buildings, it's a 1.3 million square feet and that's square feet, that's not cubic feet that we've got to condition.
Okay, because I know we have some buildings where, you said different ages for the equipment, because, like, for instance, Davenport and Slay Ball, I think, everyone knows that that's a complex now. Some of those buildings have been added on to, or have different
Yes,
systems, so, okay, but thank you, I appreciate it.
absolutely. Yes.
Would you please make this presentation, attach it to our agenda so we can look at it and have a copy of it for ourselves?
Sure.
Thank
Sure,
you.
absolutely, not a problem.
I have a question.
Sure.
Could you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. How much are we spending to repair these systems, and what are you proposing to budget for? Like, what's the bottom line you would like to have?
Yeah, I couldn't understand.
What are you budgeting for?
If I understood Mrs. Bird, you're asking the cost for systems and how much we're going to be budgeting for repairs? Did I pick that up correctly?
Yeah,
Okay, so
that's the cost of how much are that. What are we spending to repair?
for repairs or for replacement? I'm not sure your question, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, how much do we pay to fix them throughout the year versus how much are we asking to be budgeted for to replace?
So how much did we spend last year on repairing, and how much are we going to budget to replace? I think I got that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Difficult to quantify, and I'll tell you why. Included in my budget numbers, and Miss and I has that, and she can share that with you. I don't have that in front of me. But I can actually demonstrate the exact figure that we paid last year to have outside companies come in when we couldn't do it ourselves. We try first, most often, all preventative maintenance is done by our in-house staff. So that saves us money. Difficult, again, to calculate. A lot of repairs we do ourselves, even some installs, small installs we do ourselves. So I really can't come up with an exact number when all that is taken into account. However, the monies that we pay to outside vendors, I do have that figure, and it can be supplied. I don't have it off the top of my head right now.
Yes, and you'll have more on that during the actual budget process anyway. And as far as the amount to be budgeted for replacement, that's actually going to be a bigger conversation And I hate to use the word, but it sounds like a referendum.
I didn't say that.
More to follow in the next few months for budget.
Well, you know, we certainly have capital investment that needs to be made. The physical plant has to be maintained in order for learning to take place. And I appreciate the presentation, and thinking in terms of a master plan is where we really need to be. I remember a few years back when we took a look at our bus situation, and we realized that, you know, we would have larger numbers of buses at certain points in time that would need to be replaced, and we realized that what we needed to do was get ourselves on a schedule and replace X number of buses each year so that we wouldn't have these huge fluctuations, these ebbs and flows. And I think we need to take the same sort of a strategic approach to, you know, proactively repairing and replacing pieces of infrastructure on a scheduled basis, preventatively and proactively, so that we're ensured that they're serving their purpose. But I appreciate the approach you're taking, and I appreciate the report tonight, and I think we're on the right track.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brunetta. Next up, our IT Director, Mr. Kevin Erdebeck.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me? Oh, I'm hitting something here, sorry, man. You are where? You there?
Good evening. And I'm also going to piggyback off of Tim a little too, because another thing that people tend to forget, because it affected my department too. I've been here 18, 19 years now, that the district's also grown in building size. Like we've added the Miller School, which is now almost 20-year-old building. We've added the primary school, the high school, which is now about 10 years plus. So those growths have, I'm sure, have affected Tim's department. And they've also affected my department in the growth and what we have to support. Not only that, with the student population grew over those years, even though it's kind of slowed down. But, you know, the early 2000s, mid-2000s, I guess that's how you refer to it now, 2000s, we had a huge student growth population. And so that's something we've had to add to as well, too. But I'm going to go ahead and start my department. I'm going to go over some things, too, which we support. I have 13 staff in my department, including myself. And we're supporting approximately 8,000 devices. That's everything from printers to computers to access points and any other peripherals that are used on computers. Right now, we're at kind of a 2-to-1 ratio with a student to computers. So we have 2 students per 1 computer. That includes Chromebooks. That's changing now with the full-day kindergarten, preschool edition. So that's something else we have to account for. And we've been discussing that and how we're going to meet that need as well. Additionally, we're supporting the data network that runs those computers. We have 18 physical servers throughout the district. Those are actual physical hardware devices, much like a computer. We have 1 at each building location. Then we have multiple at the high school, because we run multiple services at the high school that support the entire district, from the smart software accounting system for HR and finance to some network services that many might not be familiar with, like DNS, DHCP, file systems, backups, and email, of course. With that, to connect those computers to our servers, we have hundreds of switches, over 250 switches. They're basically connections from the computer to the closet, back to the servers, and or to get you out to the internet, too. And then we also have the wireless network, which continues to grow as well, too. We've only got more devices, wireless devices, so we've always had kind of 100% coverage, but now we have so many devices that it's more than coverage that we're worried about. It's called density. We need to be able to handle that number of devices in any one given space. So that's something we've been working on for the past couple of years, too, and continue to work on into the future. We also handle a lot of data responsibilities and software support, too. Once again, I can refer back to the HR system. We do the upgrades for those systems. Imperial classroom management, we now the Google admin. Google's become a lot of everyone's world, and we're the ones that administer the back-end system, do the data syncs of those network accounts into Google accounts, and other data syncs related to those kind of systems. Additionally, we also do a lot of the state reporting for NJ Smart. It seems like every other month there's a new NJ Smart report, or they're tweaking the NJ Smart report to add new data elements. That's become challenging sometimes because, especially lately, there's so many new CARES Act funding elements that just came about and no one was ready for them. So we're kind of scrambling to get that data together to try to get to manage our student IDs that they're required to obtain from NJ Smart. We also help with the Office of Civil Rights report, which Dr. Charleston's very involved with, and some other DOE reports that we kind of submit. We're also responsible for all the desktops, not just the hardware itself, but also the patches, the updates, the operating system, Microsoft Office, and making sure those are safe and have antiviruses and have all the protections they need for all the staff and students, including our data network. Other things we do is EHDTV and social media, webpage, and communications. I'm sure you guys are getting inundated with that stuff now. It's very important right now, communications, and the best format, the way we're in, is electronic. So we focus a lot of our attention right now to managing the website, updating social media, getting school messenger messages out, which are text, calling, and email. And then there's video production as well that the TV studio handles. And that's for any events, such as winter concerts and just normal events, informational videos, a lot of training videos that we put out through that department as well. Additionally, we support all the projection systems in the district. In some format, we work with some local AV coordinators, but we also support local setups for the elementary schools. And then there's another piece which we work closely a lot of times with other departments such as facilities, security department. A lot of that stuff has now become a network. It needs network operation to operate, basically. All the security cameras are running off the network. They connect to these switches, and they're provided not only just data connections to stream the video, but also power through those switches. So it's kind of nice. We don't have to run power to some of these devices. They can get the power off the switch itself. It's called power over Ethernet. So it uses the same cable for data and the same cable for power. So that's one of the things why these switches are so important as well. Additionally, we also manage a lot of stuff for the BAS system. There's a server that manages some of the buildings. We have to maintain that server, make sure it's operational. We also have to maintain computers so they can access those systems, and a lot of times remote connections. Additionally, there's one other thing that we've kind of been doing the past couple of years, and that's supporting the Hamilton Township MUA. They, as time permits, they ask us for work orders. We have a shared service agreement with them. They actually pay us for the man hours, and depending on who we're sending, an engineer or a tech, and depending on the work, they basically pay the district for us to come and provide them services. So that's kind of been a little beneficial budgetary item. So for 2020, there's kind of two factors in this. There's things that we already planned for, and then COVID hit. So I'm going to go into the things we've kind of accomplished based on what we were planning for. Then I'm going to go into things that we supported during COVID. Once again, a tie-in with Tim, we work very closely with the facilities department. We've done a lot of construction projects with them, coming from the vestibules, the main office, the new spaces for kindergarten and pre-K. The IT responsibility when you're dealing with those new spaces is a lot of the data wiring, phones. For example, the vestibules had new intercom camera systems, so when a person walks up, they press a button, there's a camera there. They can speak through that camera. That's all done through the computer network. So we work closely with the vendor and Tim's department to set up those cameras. We ran the wiring. We did a lot of the training of the staff on how to use those cameras, and we still continue to support them. The main office moves were big. We did all the data wiring ourselves, so they didn't have to contract that out, as well as the phone moves. So we have miles and miles of cable through this district that our IT department has run, and a lot of it is due to these new spaces. Other things we do every year is these switch upgrades that I was talking about. We have switches that are in excess of 10 years old, which is kind of old for network equipment, honestly. I know Tim speaks 25 years plus for some of his equipment, but 10 years in technology is pretty old. So we continue to replace those. We continue to add more power over Ethernet devices, as I mentioned before, to support all this new equipment that's coming in that requires that technology. It also requires the newer speeds. Kids learning in class, especially remotely these days, we need fast speeds, a lot of bandwidth that everyone refers to. Other things, speaking of bandwidth, are our wireless upgrades and expansion. So that's another thing that's been beneficial in the classroom. It's helped us kind of be prepared for this remote situation that no one really expected. So when the teachers are in class, they have that access. And fortunately, we've been making those upgrades, and we continue to make those upgrades. It's only gotten better in the past couple months. because of the changes we made with those planned upgrades. Other things we also planned this year prior to COVID was our backbone, our Wan and Fiber upgrades. I know previously in a meeting about bandwidth, I spoke about the Miller link, how we increased that Miller link by 10 times. So that was a planned improvement based on the size of school. We knew in the next 10 to 15 years that's going to be needed. The way technology changes, it could even come sooner where we can kind of start getting into that increased bandwidth. The other thing we did in conjunction was the fiber at that school. So the fiber was also at a slower speed. Like fiber can only carry so much. There's different qualities of fiber. So we've increased the fiber at the Miller School, the Fernwood School, and the high school was a couple years ago, but this year we did Miller and Fernwood by 10 times as well too. We also just completed the Alder Avenue WAN link to 10 gigs and also the Fernwood Middle School. So we've kind of been working in order of our largest schools. Those have the most need. Right now, the elementary schools aren't really stressing the network as much, except maybe the transportation complex, because that has multiple schools, that has one link coming over. And I'll go into more detail of that with some of our future projects. Additionally, we did a lot of migrations to the cloud. So the cloud's the new topic, right? Or it's been new for a few years now. But we're starting to see the benefit of moving to the cloud. One, a lot of companies are charging you lower support costs if you move to the cloud instead of hosting the server on site. And there's also an added element of security. They're doing a lot of the backups. There's no single point of failure. There's no single point of entry. We don't have it here anymore. If we had our Infinite Campus server go down, we're 100% down. But now that that's in the cloud, they have multiple Infinite Campus servers, multiple backups. The chances of us losing access to that are very low unless we lost internet access. And same with Follett and a couple other systems. We also moved the point of sale system, which is food services. They also moved that system to the cloud too, which provides a lot of redundancy for them. Other things we did is we moved to Google Enterprise this year, which is a little upgrade from our standard Google, and that allowed some integrations and became very useful for COVID, especially with the Infinite Campus Gradebook sync. So basically, any assignments they're putting in Google are syncing to Infinite Campus so that they're not entering grades in twice. There's a little work that the teacher has to do on their end, but most have set that up. Additionally, with that, and still tied into COVID, is something else that was rolled out was blended learning. We worked very closely with Sam Elko in the guidance department. She kind of shook this down, but we put it in place. And that's blended learning is allowing us this hybrid learning and to balance the families. So you have the same families in A group and B group and C group. When you try to do that manually, 7,000 students, it becomes near impossible. This kind of has all those algorithms to do those placements. So it saved a lot of time and was able to roll that out very quickly. Other accomplishments we're doing is we continue to always upgrade the classroom technology, such as projection systems. We still have some older projection systems we need to address. We have some of the newer interactive technology that's old now too, such as the smart boards. The smart boards have kind of been a little thorn in our side because a lot of them are mounted physically in buildings. So when they go bad, the whole system's bad. So what we've been starting to do is roll into these devices called box lights. You'll see in the lower pictures. They're basically like TVs on carts, but they're touchscreen and interactive. They're actually their own computer too. So this gives us a lot of flexibility. So if a system, say a classroom changes into an office or vice versa, or the classroom moves to another building, you can move the whole device. There's no cost to rewire a room, hang a projector. That's kind of the situation we're in now with some of the projection systems. If we convert a classroom or make a new classroom, the cost to move it is also a factor you have to pay into. With these, you just roll it down the hall. It's all in one. You don't have wires across the floor. It's even wireless. I mean, you do have a power plug, but usually it's up against a wall anyway. Now to our COVID response. And now this has made a lot of work for us. It's made a lot of work for everyone in this room, I believe. So we obviously have students at home that didn't have Wi-Fi or devices. So we've given out approximately 3,000 devices. We've broken down carts, hundreds of carts that we've had to break down. There was a couple nights that me and my staff were here at Miller School ripping carts apart, cutting the wires off, and trying to get devices ready, getting them tagged, or getting them logged at least. And we still continue to do that. We're at a point, though, where we're getting pretty low, but I mean, I know there's a few months left. I think we can survive with what's on hand. And based on the requests, it definitely slowed down. The problem we're starting to see now is devices going bad and a lot of breakage. The longer this goes on, we're starting to see a lot of broken devices, chargers getting broken. So that's getting a little harder to support. We can fix some of them. We have some units that are becoming end of life that we can no longer fix, though. We also need the time to fix them, so it's not like it takes a minute to fix. We're changing screens, changing keyboards. But we're starting to recycle some of those ones we've been repairing and getting parts for out now. We have about 40 Wi-Fi hotspots out. That fluctuates almost daily, and same with the Chromebooks. As students transfer out, they either return a device, and it tends to go out pretty soon after that, but we've been hovering around the 40 distributed. The other thing we've had to support is the new hybrid instruction plan. And I mean, I'll probably be the first one to tell you I was pretty frightened of that when they said they wanted to stream from within the classroom while kids were there. Fortunately, we made some changes. We've installed some more access points. We did a lot of stress testing prior to it happen. There was a couple weeks where we did have some problems. Fortunately, like I had a great team on hand, and we worked with our provider, and we kind of determined it to be like Google didn't like that we had 60,000 connections from home users going out. So one of my engineers came up with a creative solution to kind of split up how we're connecting out to the internet and Google. Goes into a little more detail, but they didn't like that it was coming from one single IP address. So we split it up. We did what's called IP pooling. We have available IP addresses, and we split the traffic amongst multiple IPs, and the problem went away. So it was never really a bandwidth problem. It was just more, they didn't like the fact that we had 60,000 connections. We even put in a ticket with them. They didn't really want to address it. Our provider was also able to prove that. Between us and the provider, we were good, but it was most of the traffic that was using Google. Now, mind you, a lot of traffic uses Google. A lot of the internet uses Google for other services such as DNS, which is another internet service. Additionally, we had assistive devices for teachers. This was another difficult task because right now, and it's gotten better, finding devices has been very difficult, especially in the quantities we need. So to find 700 teacher devices was very difficult. So we worked, one of my vendors said, I have them, I need a PO now, and working with the business department, they were able to provide that. We got it really quick. I needed a PO to hold those devices. They were the only devices that they could guarantee me by September. And fortunately, those teacher devices came in by the first week of school, which is great. The only problem is when 700 devices show up in a box, you got to unbox them, you got to set them up, join the Google network. So that was another task that we spent a couple days, almost 48 hours straight, just setting up Chromebooks. And then additionally, there becomes more need. Because 700 is exactly what we need, almost exactly what we need for teachers. So what happens if these devices go bad, which is inevitable? Someone drops a device. So we had some devices out of box that didn't work. We put in a warranty claim. They don't have the devices to replace them under warranty right now. So there's other things we thought ahead and purchased, such as some webcams and what are called Ethernet dongles. So Chromebooks can't plug into a wall. They don't have an Ethernet adapter for the internet. They only are Wi-Fi. So what happens if Wi-Fi goes bad? So those are things we purchased to try. We couldn't get a lot, but we got as many as we could just to address any needs that happen or last minute things that come up. So they can use a webcam put on their classroom computer if their device went bad. They can use an Ethernet adapter if the Wi-Fi stopped working. And in many situations, when teachers first came back, we were doing that. We're giving them a lot of Ethernet adapters because we're still waiting on access points to try to address Wi-Fi in their spaces. So that bought us some time. Another demand was how do they communicate with these students in their classroom? When you're walking around, if you're kind of stationary, you have to be right by the device or the student at home's not going to hear you. Granted, they're not going to see you, but they're definitely not going to hear you, and you might not hear them. So that was another thing we struggled to find were headsets that would work via Bluetooth, so the teacher can walk around, turn to the board, and the students at home could still hear them. They could still hear the students at home, as well as interact with the students in their classroom. That became a little creative, purchasing that too. We searched, we couldn't find the quantities we needed. I could find 6 headsets any day. I couldn't find 800. I found some on Amazon. A couple, Mike and I both, Mike Sweeter and I, we both purchased like a couple test sets off of Amazon for ourselves to see if they'll work. Found that they worked. And we found the best one that we thought for the best price. And we got 800 headsets that came in about a week after we started hybrid instruction. And then the next challenge was getting 800 headsets out to the staff. So we got that. That was pretty easy. The staff, we created some training videos. Leanna Mullen made some great videos so that they could follow to know how to hook up their devices. A lot of this is, it's been fun. And then one of the most fun things is supporting the students and parents at home. And everyone has a different level of technology. Everyone has a different network at home. So it's very difficult. A lot of it's only offering suggestions. We created some new links like a CB help link, so if they had a Chromebook, they could contact that, just to try to manage it, even though it's all the same people that are answering these. Same with our help desk, resetting accounts, such like that, because now everyone was very dependent from kindergarten, even some preschool, and up, of having to know their network logins. So just imagine trying to help a first grader, kindergartner, that's never been in a school district before, never logged into Google, and their parents, and sometimes grandparents or other guardians. And it was definitely a challenge. Even just getting parent portal accounts so they can log in to find their students' accounts. We're getting 400 emails a day. And there was a couple nights that we were up till 2 a.m. just trying to catch up. So it was very busy. I mean, September was very busy. August was very busy. We were pretty caught up in the middle of September with those portal accounts. We still get them once in a while. We still have new parents coming in. A lot of people are pretty comfortable with it. It gets busy again, too, when report cards and such come out. So that's been some of the challenges, probably some I didn't address. And then just looking ahead, besides surviving the rest of this year, we still have to move forward as if COVID's not occurring, or even to support COVID or any other, whatever the next crisis might be, right? So, so everything we've always done, I've mentioned it before, we continue to do replacement plans. We continue to replace servers as they age out. Sometimes replacing these servers is actually a benefit. We're getting a server that can support more what we call virtual servers. So we're replacing maybe 3 servers with 1. So what that reduces is your electrical footprint, your cooling footprint, and just management entirely. Other things we're focusing on now too, we used to always have a computer replacement plan. The labs are still pretty important to the district, so we kind of are changing the focus of computers to replace the labs. And then the other big thing is the Chromebooks, of course. So right now we have over 600 Chromebooks that are end of life as per Google stating next year. So that's one thing I'm focusing on, is replacing those 600. Then we bought in at different stages various Chromebooks. So for the next, we're basically entering a cycle where this is going to continue to happen for as long as we're using Chromebooks till whatever the next technology might be, right? So that's kind of our replacement plan forever, is to continue to cycle out Chromebooks. So we had one order that was 3,000 Chromebooks, so those are all going to come due around the same time too, probably 2 years after that. So these are things we have to plan and account for. We've just ordered new Chromebooks, and we've been waiting on some. They're starting to come in. Then you have to figure 5 to 6 years, those will need to be replaced. So this is a continual cycle that we've entered into with these Chromebooks. Switches and access points are something I mentioned before. Those are something that will continue to upgrade. Wireless access points, they last a long time, but the technology and demand changes. So the speeds are always changing. Technology is something that it's very hard to keep up with, or very, very hard to stay ahead of. So that's become one of the bigger challenges. Wan and Fiber Upgrades, stuff I spoke about before, the tower links, the fiber. Those are other things we're looking to upgrade. As I mentioned before, we'll probably do the transportation complex next. With the towers, fiber is another story there because there's a lot of underground fiber. And I couldn't even quantify what that cost is. I haven't had anyone had to come in and dig up fiber and bury fiber across parking lots before. The good thing is that's not a huge need, but the WAN link will be, because they all come to one point, and that's where the choke point will be. So the WAN link we could do without doing that kind of construction work. But that is our next largest complex because of all the buildings there, the central office is there, and the 3 buildings, schools and grounds and facilities. There's a lot more people over there compared to Davenport, which really hasn't even stressed their current link. They're using maybe about half of a gig, where the new links are 10 gigs. So we have some time with Davenport, unless you guys build more buildings over there, And then additionally, there's some phone system upgrades that we've kind of been phasing in every year and doing small upgrades. This allows us to take some advantage of some of the new software on the phone systems to tie into the paging systems and, more for security and other emergency needs that we can gain. And then there's AV and media technology. We're still going to continue to upgrade the presentation systems throughout the district, and there's also software licensing issues and stuff that we want to make sure we have in place, especially with social media, to make sure we're protected and in compliance. And then normally everything that I normally budget every year is a lot of software renewals, Microsoft Office, the Microsoft Server Suites, a lot of renewals such as that. And that kind of concludes my presentation.
Would you also attach it to our agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any questions, Mike?
Mr. Price, I have a question for Kevin.
Yes.
Go back to the 40 hotspots and explain to us what is the purpose of the hotspots. Are they being used by students in the field that don't have internet connection at home?
Yeah,
And,
yes, they're being used by students.
Right.
So we purchased 50 from Verizon with the assumption, we've done surveys, but as mentioned before, we don't always have accurate data from surveys because people don't fill them out or people fill them out falsely.
so what's the monthly charge on those hotspots?
Well,
Are we getting billed on those now?
Well, we paid up front for 6 months of data, and it's unlimited data, which is good too. There are some programs that offered free services, but it was up to 2 gigs, and most of our students are exceeding 2 gigs in a day. So those became, so having the unlimited fee. After that, I think it was, I want to say it was around $15 a month after that if we exceed the 6 months.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
so that everybody understands what they're for when you mention the hotspots.
Yeah, they're for students that don't have internet access or poor internet access. Unfortunately, we even had students that had emergency situations where they've had to be out of their
Some
home.
of the CARES money may cover that too, right, Sandra, is that possible?
Correct, we did use grant money for that,
Yeah.
and it was $60 per device, along with about $20 a month for 6 months that was prepaid.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
That's all.
Anybody else? For him?
I just wanted to say, number one, thank you. I mean, the technology department is definitely in high demand and a lot of pressure on you. And when I was sitting here listening to the presentation and all that you and your staff have done, and the question is not which school is anything first or anything like that. Just the question is, the question more so is, I heard you mention things that, I know you talked about bandwidth, you talked about devices. Out of all what for you, what really rings out is, or do you need all of it, but what would you say would be your biggest need? I mean, is it staffing, additional people, devices, more whatever? And the other part of the question is, and I'm not, let me make it clear, I'm not suggesting that we outsource our technology department. That's not what I'm going to ask. I'm just going to ask, do we ever have to bring in other companies to support, like, with additional staffing, technology staff that's from another company, like a substitute, almost tech company, to help support what we do here, or
Yeah, those are great questions. Personally, we are a lot of self-installers, as Tim is with his department. When we buy switches, a lot of other districts pay for them to install that. We configure our own, which is great too, especially when they go down. We have such a fast response time. So fortunately, we've been able to handle that stuff. When it comes to like a technology need, I want to continue to build out the infrastructure because that'll future-proof us. I mean, these new links, when they go up, will probably be here long after even I retire. So, I can't imagine technology that's going to stress 10 gigs. But there was no in between. It's either 1 to 10, so it's not like I can get 5 or something like that. When it comes to staffing, my biggest concern is if we continue to increase with Chromebooks. And right now, when we start to get these Chromebooks back, what shape they're going to be in, how to get them back together, how to get them redeployed, that alone was a lot of work just getting them out, and it's still a lot of work getting them out. So when they come back and if we order new devices, which we do have some on order already using CARES Act, getting those devices redeployed. In some instances, if we work with a vendor, they'll sometimes, when we ordered 3,000 a couple years ago, they built the carts, they enrolled them for us, we gave them that all information. But right now, stuff's been coming at us in so many directions, we don't have time to even organize that, and that also delays the process. We need stuff yesterday. So if I waited on a vendor to set up the 1,600 that are in the process of coming in, and we got an 700, we're waiting on another 700 to 800. If I waited on that, that just delays them from getting out in the students' hands right now. But hopefully COVID ends and we come to the summer, and that's where my biggest challenge is probably going to be when we get all these devices back and we have to put them back together and get them in working shape. And I don't have this, we also have other projects going on, and like before, once June hits, it feels like it's September already. And that's where, we're setting up classrooms, we're doing so much work. To pull people to set up devices or repair devices is a challenge. And just the thought I even have too, and some other districts have done it, especially as they increase Chromebook sizes and devices sizes, is maybe have like student workers or like an internship where they're kind of like the Chromebook help desk, high school students. I'm sure there's something, but that's another topic. I don't know how to even address that. But some schools have done that where they've had a student help desk,
That's a
you know?
good idea.
Just for Chromebooks. I mean, we wouldn't have them doing network accounts, they can't have that access. But managing, rebuilding carts, stuff like that is where it's really a labor-intensive job, and we can teach someone how to do it. And they'll also get some work experience, so.
Thank you, and I just want to say that I don't know if, I'm just saying this to anybody who's watching. I was not there when you did all your, took care of all the equipment, but he is not exaggerating the amount of work. And just to take a Chromebook card apart and the demand that's on every technology department, I think, in every school district across the country. So I really appreciate it because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. So thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Kevin. Excellent work, and we know that this year had its own unique challenges above and beyond. It's very much appreciated. So at this point, as we transition, we are going to move to finance and operations. And whenever you're ready, I'll ask Mr. Price to give our...
Are we ready? Okay. This is Mr. Price. I'm going to give the Finance and Operations Committee report that we had virtually on January 12th. Attending was myself, Mr. Price, I'm the chair this year, Ms. Szilagyi, Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Castellano, and Ms. Anea and Dr. Brugio. We discussed the norms of the Finance and Operations Committee. We discussed committee updates. There were discussion items. We talked about transportation. We talked about organization chart, vacancies, transportation coordinator. We talked about the year 2021 update, special ed runs, hourly rate increases, paid hourly versus per run. We talked about list disposals that are going to go on government deals to scrap. We talked about plans for the full board presentation, which are going to be forthcoming soon. It will be the bus driver instruction booklet. We're talking about a $1,000 onboarding, where you must have 2 years of work experience to try to attract more people that are interested in driving buses. We talked again about hourly increases, and we talked about working with special education parents and contracts instead of door-to-door. We talked about food service. We discussed the organizational chart. We discussed vacancies, medical leaves. We discussed the December stimulus to assist with food service loss previously discussed. Facilities. We had an excellent presentation tonight by Mr. Brunetta, and we discussed a lot of things that were discussed during this presentation tonight. So, and we also discussed the organizational chart, vacancies, medical leaves, and of course projects presented by Mr. Brunetta. Business office. We discussed the organizational chart for Sandra's office, vacancies, medical leaves, evaluations of desk audits, salary ranges by title, audit updates, and we discussed budget calendar and full board process. Again, everything that we discussed, if you want to drill down on it in more detail, we are now on a Google Drive. Finance and Operations is now on Google Drive, so all of us can go on there and you can look at what I'm talking about and you can get more information on it, because I don't want to take up too much time. I'm just giving you a briefing of basically what we discussed and what we did. It's the first meeting of the year, and we did a lot. There are some action items that are coming up tonight that we discussed, and I'm sure Sandra will have more on that, about out-of-district travel and professional services contract. And these action items would be items for the 26th meeting, would be capital reserve withdrawal. So that concludes my report, and I'm sure that Sandra may have something to add to that. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price, great job.
Thank you.
I do want to just add, there were 2 things added to the agenda that was not covered during our committee meeting, and that is the revised CARES Act grant. We did get an additional funding through the first grant we've ever received, and I do have the amended spending on the agenda. Just to highlight, originally it was spent on 100% of tuition, and that was to help offset the $4.1 million that was cut from state aid. The expansion money, or the new money, is actually in green on the agenda, and that is for administrative to support to help with the road back, and that was actually Dr. Heary from August to December. The FICA related to his salary, as well as supplies and materials we have already purchased that we are now able to offset with grant money for about 71,000 and change. So that amended grant is there for approval. We also have the learning loss grant, and I will turn over to Mr. Santilli in just one second, because I actually want to go backwards. In our report, Mr. Price spoke about the budget process. Budget is a full board discussion, but in committee, I showed them an example of how the report will look different this year. So if I have 2 seconds, I would just like to show everybody. So let me see if, oh, it's not, let me go in here, shared drives. Sorry, 1 second, let me get there. They're on top where? Oh, they're there. All right, sorry. All right, so this is, good job. So this is the report you guys are used to seeing in your binder. Think of the binders when the budget comes out. So as we're meeting with all the directors and principals, we're noticing data points aren't really that accurate. I'm going to give this a line, one line as an example. In the 2020 budget for grounds supplies, we were closed in the spring. We didn't spend much money. So you see the spending there is like $40,000. In 2021, we cut their budget by 25% because we were opening up the school year closed. 2022, it looks like he's asking for $18,000 more than normal. Not really relevant data points for you guys to kind of wrap your heads around. So what I want to do is do a different format of a report, and this is what it would look like. It gives you the budget line and description. It still gives you all the justification lines, but instead of just having a quick snapshot of 2 years, it actually has the history of the different years, the original budget, the adjusted budget with the expenditures. Now, when you see Mr. Burnetta asking for $92,000, you can see in previous years, it's sort of in line with his last 3 budgets. Spending, not as much, so maybe we may be able to cut that. This is not the final budget we're proposing. But this gives you more relevant data than the other report. So I want to just take a minute before we go into the season to show you it's going to look different, and that's why. Make sense? Questions? Okay, great. So we do talk budget full board, but I had to run it past committee to make sure they understood before I brought it over. All right? All right. And now Mr. Santilli.
So the learning loss grant and the information that was provided, I just wanted to briefly provide an update in regards to that. I'm going to start with the intent and the purpose of the learning loss grant. And obviously this grant is to really focus on, and I'm just going to read in part from the grant, but it's the intent of addressing student learning loss to significantly reduce students' learning loss resulting from school closures due to COVID-19 through the implementation of evidence-based interventions that scale up and enhance existing academic or non-academic programs and initiatives that mitigate further learning loss and accelerate academic progress. So with that in mind, I just wanted to highlight that piece. Unlike other grant opportunities or other initiatives that we may focus on, this is to enhance and really truly drill down to students who may have, in other words, not just in my mind, have taken a learning loss, but really probably more of a learning delay due to COVID-19. That is a term that we've been utilizing ourselves in central office in hopes that when we think about response to intervention and the work that we've done as a district, we want to continue that work, and this is an opportunity for us to enhance that work. So if you can think for a minute, there could be a student out there, and we know that they exist, that would be a Tier 1 student. That was a Tier 1 student prior to March of 2020. During the time now from March 2020 to current day, what has ended up happening is that student that was once a Tier 1 student may have become or transitioned to become a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 student due to, again, maybe not necessarily learning loss, but a learning delay. Some of those things are coupled with factors of not being in school, not having face-to-face, in-person education, building a relationship. You know, in EHT, we start with embrace first. And if a student isn't feeling safe, if a student doesn't have that person to connect with, and they're just doing it through a screen, a lot of that is lost. Therefore, the intent of this grant is mainly to focus on that initiative. Our goal and the way that we approach this was to be able to extract that data, disseminate that data with a focus on being able to attack and really try to remediate both academic and also social emotional learning. One of the things that we're going to do is that prior to even the submission of this grant, we've already started this work as we talked about before, and we started to take a look at what we could do even using local funds. One of the things that we're focused on is trying to have time on task where we can use the data to be able to identify those students, start to invite them and remediate them. One of the plans that we have in place using local funds would be to offset that in the months of March, April, and May on Saturday mornings to invite students into the building to be able to focus on their needs. Then in addition to that, this grant would provide us an opportunity in conjunction with going into, since we're talking about budget season, in conjunction with the submission of this grant, also submitting a budget that supports, in addition to this grant, the same opportunities. Therefore, if we're not successful, we have it built in to be able to support. Because at the end of the day, this is something that we know we needed to do and we want to do as a district for students that have this learning loss or delay. What would end up happening is the primary goal throughout the summer would be to focus 4 primary days in the summer to partner, mentor teachers with students that we've identified, have them come in with the focus on the CASTLE framework and overcoming obstacles curriculum, to be able to really partner with students and teachers in person, to be able to focus on social emotional learning, build those relationships, and then also use the data that we already have in district from either Linkit, Moby, Max, and the like, to be able to find out where they might be struggling academically. Again, the purpose of this is threefold. It's social emotional learning, math, and language arts. You have the opportunity to submit for one and or all, and we are submitting with all in mind going into this. Then moving forward for the remainder of next year, so if you think ahead to the 2021 school or 21-22 school year, what would end up happening is that partnership would continue. So with bi-weekly meetings, teachers and mentor teachers that were established in the summer would then continue to meet with those same students, continue to do check-in and check-outs with them, not just during those bi-weekly meetings, but even could occur during the course of the week and the school day. And then in addition to that, we would hope to close out in the following summer. So now we're talking summer of 2022 is when we have the opportunity to run this grant till. And then we would be able to either close out and or if we can continue based on the outcome and the results of this, if we continue to identify more students, we would want to continue to locally fund this with the idea of identifying students once again that may still be having that delay, and then bring in a new group or close out with the existing group of students. So it is a threefold approach, and I want to be clear that this is really focusing on those students that were once Tier 1 who may now be falling into that Tier 2 and Tier 3 category based off of our current programming and initiatives.
Thank you, Mr. Santilli. And just one more item for finance before we move on. We did have some board member questions. So as a reminder, the board gets the agenda on the Friday before the meeting. They're able to submit questions just for clarification before they take action. And we had 2 finance questions this time. One was regarding the Finance Committee meeting minutes, and as Mr. Price noted, we are now in a Google Drive as well as the report on board docs. For transfers, there is an NJASA residency fee, and that has to do with Dr. Tarleton successfully completing his Chief School Administration certification. We have to then pay the residency fee to the association in accordance with his contract. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Anything else on finance and ops before before we move on? All right, we'll go ahead and move into curriculum, and we'll ask for our committee report from Ms. Alabarga.
Good evening. Our curriculum meeting was held virtually on January 12th. In attendance was Mr. Delabarca, Ms. Gilbert-Floyd, as well as myself, Mr. Santilli, Dr. Gruccio, Mrs. Elko, Ms. Moss, and Dr. Graham. We discussed briefly some professional development that needs board approval next week. We don't have any field trips on the agenda due to COVID-19. Most of our time we spent talking about the program of studies. Right now it's a working copy. Ms. Elko explained to us that the process starts in November. The supervisors check courses and make sure they meet requirements. Dates have to be changed, of course, and 2 new courses that will be added into it will be the Intro to Flight and Honors Ethics course. Dr. Graham told us about the Intro to Flight course, which is a 10th grade aviation course. It's part of the Aviation Academy. It's the second course. It's designed to expose students to the aspects of aviation, and it also fills an elective in the career and tech ed requirement. So if a student thinks they might be interested in it, they can take it to fulfill that requirement. Ms. Moss told us about the Honors Ethics course. It's through film and literature. Students take it after honors philosophy or by teacher recommendation. It is dual credit through ACCC. They present both sides of the arguments, and it teaches the students to ground opinions in theory, not on TikTok. And it's required for those entering the medical field as well as other professions. And then they discussed with us from ACCC, it's an AVIT 40, Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operation in conjunction with the Atlantic Cape Community College. It's held from February 2nd to May 13th. It's 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday from 3 to 5, I believe, in the hybrid format. They'll use one of our classrooms. It's open to 10 to 12th grade students, and it's funded through a Perkins grant. ACCC wrote us into the Perkins grant, and that is why we're able to do this. And we already have about 6 or 7 students interested in the course, and they're looking for a diverse group of students. And if necessary, the course can be held virtually if we have to flip back into remote learning. Besides that, we just talked about committee norms and our meeting time. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Anything to add from administration?
Yes, Mr. Castellano, there was one question that came up today, and that was, is there a plan for live streaming our sports so that our district's families and friends will be able to watch games live due to COVID restrictions in place for in-person attendance? I will just be able to report out that right now we are exploring options. The district's athletic director is contacting counterparts in the Cal, and also, of course, the ITS department is working diligently to explore possible options for accomplishing this goal, and we did discuss that again as a central administrative team as well this afternoon. So, thank you.
Very good. I see Mrs. Sullivan.
I know that the rec department for the township is going to live stream their games, so maybe we can get some info on what they're doing too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that input.
I have one question. When we talk about live streaming sports and activity, are we thinking we have a lot of sports? So I just think about how we would be able to have, let's say if something's going on simultaneously.
That is, those are all the things that we're
Okay.
considering.
All
So
right.
for instance, it's things to consider, and I'm
Seniors,
just
I
going to
mean-
give you ideas. I'm not saying that any of this is
Gotcha.
certainly going to take place, but really focusing like on home events, for instance,
Okay. That's what
because
I-
that is more manageable. So girls' basketball might be away at Holy Spirit, but let's say boys is playing home, we would be able to then, of course, live stream home. That is why we're getting in touch with the counterparts in the Cal to see what they are doing, because we also want to be able to advertise that to our families and community, because they may have something going on in another school district that we can that might allow everyone else to watch, even when they're away.
Got it.
That depends on them.
So we're in the planning stage.
Absolutely, yes.
Sounds good.
Very good. Mrs. Sullivan.
One other thing you might want to check down are a couple of the colleges around that have, I know when my son was in college, every college that they played with had a website that you could go and watch the games. So there might be something that we can get from the colleges in the area that will show us how we as a high school can do the same thing.
Okay, thank you very
And
much.
it all flowed through the same company.
Yeah, no,
all
we'll
the
definitely take that in consideration, and I'll pass that on to Mr. Pellegrino. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything for curriculum? I'm going to ask Dr. Charlton if there's anything for public session.
I do not have any additional updates tonight, Mr. President. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Bird was not feeling well. She had to sign off. Policy does not have any action for next week. We did discuss a few items that we may want to look at in February, and I'll let Mrs. Bird report out on those next Tuesday. And so then with that, I want to move just into 11, our board calendar and updates. And I want to just remind everyone, if you have not, to please get your acknowledgement of ethics form to Miss Anaya. Then also, I just wanted to remind elected and re-elected and new board members of your school board's training responsibilities. Please check with Miss Anaya on that to see the requirements differ for re-elected board members versus people in their first year, their second year, versus new board members. Basically, we all have different requirements. And really, for all of us, it's a good idea to take a look at the training that's available. This is, winter and kind of a quiet time and a good time to get that taken care of online. I'm gonna ask and see if Mr. Delabarca has anything. But one other thing I do want to mention is that there's been requests for visits, and so what we want to do is try to, kind of not be a burden on our administrators during this difficult time, but people do want to get in and take a look at what's going on. So I'm going to just ask if our administration can give us a date or two, your preference on a date, and we'll, kind of try to consolidate.
Yep,
So-
absolutely. And off the top of my head, I'm looking at my staff, I don't know what their calendars look like, but I'd be glad to email some dates to you tomorrow.
Yeah, why don't you shoot out like your first choice, first or second, or whatever makes more sense. We don't want to get in the way of, things getting up and running, but, folks do want to get in and get a look. So, good, that'll take care of that. And then I'm going to see if Mr. Delabarca has anything to report for us from the Atlantic County School Boards Association.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Can you hear me, folks?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You mentioned the training fee of new board members and newly elected and re-elected folks. School boards took their fee to be a trainer, so I'll be interested to see how that goes. For County School Board Association, our meeting is scheduled for February 18th, which is a Thursday at 7 o'clock. It will be a virtual meeting, and the topic is going to be how to support struggling learners, which is the topic we also discussed on Monday at the seniors meeting that was held on web. So it's an interesting topic, and we're going to have some good time with that on the February 18th. Thank you all. Good to talk to you all. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Delabarca. Very much appreciated. So yes, please take advantage of those. We are now going to go to our public comment period, and I'll just remind everyone of our rules of the road. Public comment is 3 minutes. We are going to ask for your name and address, and please keep in mind that we cannot address personnel or litigation matters, and it also may be the case that you have a complicated question and someone would have to get back to you with a more extensive answer. So with that, we will go to the phones.
Mr. Castellano, will you be entertaining a finance motion after public comment then?
Yeah, I'll
Thank you.
do that afterward.
Thank you. And as a reminder to the community, just to please do not leave a voicemail, just continue to call if the line is tied up. There are no members of the public in person, so we will go right to the phone lines. You are now live streaming. Please state your name and address.
My name is Jessica LaGreca. My address is 118 Leo Avenue. I had a couple questions. The first one is the new pre-K starting on February 1st, 5 days in person? Another question I had is they moved about 5 kindergarten classes to Swift. What kind of some of the pre-K classes? Isn't that they were crowding Swift? And if Swift had room for that, couldn't we have done more in-person time with the kindergarten children that are already there instead of having pre-K? And then my other question is Ocean City and other schools are bringing in the younger children, kindergarten through 4th or 5th grade for 5 days in person, 4 days in person, and making more news to get the younger kids in school. I know everyone says we have the largest school district, but we have separate buildings. So it shouldn't be as big of a deal as it's made out to be, in my opinion, because you're not looking at 7,000 kids at once. You're looking at 2,001, 2,000, and others have all these separate buildings. It shouldn't be as much of a project as it's made out to be. And there's other several large districts throughout New Jersey that are bringing in the younger kids for more time in person. And then my last one is a couple meetings ago, Mrs. Bird brought up plexiglass and different things, and you guys took that to private versus the board. I'm not sure what the term why couldn't that have been answered to the parents? Because that's questions we all have. A lot of the schools are in session, and you're claiming that there's these standards, but yet we are not being kept in the loop. Where are the standards for private different for public and vice versa? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can kind of make out what that was if we want to, but, oh. Okay, so,
Did you need me to repeat that? The name Stephanie, Leo, yeah, I have her information, you can give her a call back, but, you want the questions or?
well, can we at least try, and then, we'll get back to her? I had a rough time hearing
So
some
she's-
of it.
She started with full-day full-day pre-K being 5 days a week as a concern or question, how can that happen? Moving 5 kindergarten classrooms from Slayball to Swift, why couldn't Swift students just go more often if there was that kind of space? Other schools are doing 5 days a week. Yes, we're larger, but we have smaller buildings, multiple buildings. Why couldn't we just figure it out in smaller pieces? And previous meeting discussed plexiglass. Did we ever look into the barrier thing?
Yes, we did. So I think we can probably address that. At least what we heard, right?
So the first question dealt with preschool. Chandra, can you clarify preschool in person?
The fact that she heard we're holding pre-K full 5 days a week. And that was just, didn't say what the specific question was.
Yes, we are. Classes in Swift, that was a operational move. There were classrooms in Swift that were occupied for other instructional purposes that had to be moved. We had to move those classrooms because the requirements of the grant required certain square footage as well as some bathroom facilities, so we were able to make that work in Swift. So we had to do in order to get the grant. Regarding Ocean City and other schools going 5 days, they have one elementary, one intermediate, and one high school. To my knowledge, the high school is not on that schedule at that time. Plexiglass I spoke about in my opening, and yes, we documented our journey with plexiglass from July through October, through board meetings, and we talked that our philosophy of the district is social distancing, and that's what's in our plan, and that's what we're adhering to at this time. I would be glad to take the name of the caller, which again I missed, I could not hear, and we could call back tomorrow with more details if I didn't cover it all. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dr. Gruccio.
Okay, you are now live streaming. Please state your name and address.
Brandon Donato, 20 Clover Hill Circle, Lake Harbor Township, New Jersey.
And go ahead with your public comment.
This question is actually directed to Dr. Gruccio, and I want to make sure that the record's clear. Dr. Gruccio, were you saying earlier that there are different rules when it comes to the implementation of health and safety requirements, that there are different rules for private schools versus public schools, as established by Executive Order 175, the Department of Education's rules, and also the Department of Health's rules at the state level? Are you saying that private schools do not have to deal with the same rules and regulations as public schools? And as I said, I want to make sure the record's clear on this issue in your understanding. Could you please answer that?
Sure, I can answer that. When I spoke about the private schools, parochial schools, I was alluding to the road back to school restart and recovery plan for education that was issued by the New Jersey Department of Education. Nothing else.
So are you saying that there are different rules for those parochial or private schools versus the public schools?
I am saying that As a public school, we are to follow the road back to school restart and recovery plan for education. I do not govern or supervise private or public schools. I do not know what they have to follow. I do know they do not have to follow the road back to
So
school.
it's possible that those rules apply, the same rules that apply to us, apply to private and parochial
Kim.
schools. Is that correct?
Kim's taking
Okay, so we appreciate your comment. You know, I think that Dr.
It's not really a
addressed
comment, it's, I'm trying to get you to answer whether or not we're different than private schools when it comes to the rules and regulations. No one seems to be able to answer that. Does anyone want to take a stab at it, or?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, are the rules and regulations that are set out by Executive Order 175, the rules and regulations set out by the Department of Health of the state level, NJ Department of Health, and the rules and regulations set out by NJ DOE, the Department of Education, are those rules and regulations regarding the safety measures that have to be in place in schools the same for public schools as they are for private schools?
Thank you.
Do you know the answer to that question? Somebody please tell me. That's all I'm asking.
Thank
Very
you.
simple. Thank you.
My conversation with the superintendent of the county of Atlantic tells me that I have to follow the road back to school, the executive orders, and the advice from the CDC, New Jersey Department of Education, and New Jersey Department of Health. When I asked him if private schools have to follow that, he said not to the extent that the public school has to.
No, his comments are.
Okay.
Can you switch the screen, Mr. Santelli? Thank you.
Do you have a public comment? Mrs.
Yes, I do have a public comment. Is this terrible phone line that we can't understand and the audience can't understand, is that because of the way that we have to format it in order to have our meeting like this? Or, like, why can't we hear these or understand what these people are saying?
So in order to run hybrid, you have to have call-ins, and I can let Mrs. Halkalko give more information. We have a speaker system for live broadcasting, which has been a request. In order to be live broadcasted and heard properly, it has to use the speaker system, microphone system that we have in place. I put them on speaker to make it easier, otherwise it would be just a handheld to a microphone. So speaker, believe it or not, makes it better.
I mean,
Wow, well, that's
this is a
really
public
bad.
meeting, so we're going above and beyond the requirements of a public meeting by allowing people to call in, and we're doing the very best we can with the technology we have to not only entertain people who are not here in person who want to call in, but also board members who can't be in person and want to call in. We're running a hybrid meeting. And so I feel we're really doing the very best we can. That, obviously it's not the best quality phone line, and anything we can do to make it better, we'd like to do that. But, I mean, this is an in-person meeting, and I think we're going above and beyond, taking calls. We're live streaming these meetings. We're doing absolutely everything we possibly can. Live streaming and having them available to be viewed afterward as well.
Well, Mr. Castellano, I understand that, but it makes us look like we're being rude because we can't understand what the people are saying to us. And if this is the way it has to be, then maybe we should come up with a different way of hearing from the public, I guess. Or, you understand what I'm saying, it's not the best.
Right.
And I understand that this is a certain way, but it's not, we can't understand what the people are saying. And I don't think they can understand at home either. So I guess that's my
Yeah.
point.
Mr. Castellano, this is Lou Salavarka.
Yes, Lou.
I'm going to join in with Barbara in saying that I've had a difficult time listening all evening. I've missed a lot of what was said from many of the reports, phone conversations falling in, and I know what I'm going to have to do is watch the replay so that I can catch myself up what I may have missed. So it is, I appreciate everything being done for us so that I can call in and other board members can call in and the public can call in, but quality is very limiting, and it is that's very difficult for me to understand much of what has gone on this evening. So again, I do appreciate what we're trying to do. Hopefully, it would be, for me, it would be great if I could still be on my computer and visually see everybody, because the visual part helps understanding the vocal part. But I understand what we're doing, and I know we're doing the best we can, but it's not good, and unfortunately, I cannot attend the meeting at the time due to the COVID situation. So I just thought I should comment about that.
Okay, and then I appreciate that, Mr. Delbark. And so we have several board member comments. We're in the middle of public comment. Can we wait?
Oh, I apologize for that.
That's all right. We'll wait till get the public. Now remember, this board agreed when school went back to live meetings, we would go back to live meetings. So, you know, that's what we agreed to do. So we have a few pending things, board members' ideas and notions. We'll get back to those during board member comment. Let's hear the best we can from the public comment, and then we'll go from there.
So over the last few minutes, there hasn't been any calls, so I'll just letting you know that public comment, if you wanted to call, it can be over. But with regard to public comment, as a reminder, you can also email questions ahead of time to the public comment at eht.k12njus. That's also another alternative. And I will just say, I heard earlier today the request to do the Google Meet function. Hypothetically, if Mr. Delabarca were on his computer doing a Google Meet, he still couldn't hear outside of our audio because none of you else are on a Google Meet, nor can we simultaneously have laptops next to each other, simultaneously having a Google Meet for him to hear us. So we tried that in the past. If you recall the meeting, I want to say it was October-ish, we actually had the microphone set up, we had a Google Meet going, and they couldn't hear anything. At least if they're on the speakerphone next to this mic, it's actually audible, more audible for them than it was on the Google Meet. But I heard the request earlier, and I talked to IT, and we're going to try it again this week to see if we can make something else happen. But the Google Meet with them participating and hearing us is going to be harder than what we're doing right now.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm open to anything that we can do to make this better, but I just feel, you know, we're really extending. Okay, so Barbara, Patrick, Mike.
Mr. Castellano,
yes.
do you want to designate that public comment is over since there have been
Yes,
additional
public,
comments, and then
yes,
can-
yes. We are now in board member.
I guess my point was that we could hear them before, and is it because of the way we set it up to do to have the people on hold instead of calling and not being able to get through? Is it because of the way we set it up now? Because now we can't understand now, but we could understand them before when they called in.
You're talking when we were virtual?
No.
You could hear them when they were virtual before?
No, we could
No,
understand
before.
when they called in before, when we were in person here, but we can't understand them tonight. Even the board members that were calling in, that was difficult. And there's something different because we could understand before and we can't understand tonight.
My recollection is when we're in this room, we can't hear people calling in as well as when we're virtual. There's a level of distortion that's inherent somewhere in this technology that's not present in a virtual meeting. We're trying a blended meeting to accommodate all. So let's put our heads together and see if there's anything we can do to make the sound quality better, because we all would like that. So I want to make sure I get the order right. So Patrick was next, Mr. Price, and then Ms. Gilbert-Floyd.
My question was actually answered. I just wanted to make the comment that the public has the option to email the board through that through our advertisement that we put out. So people can utilize that as well. That's all.
Mr. Price was next.
I think we had a good discussion about it. It's not a perfect science right now, but I think we will improve on it. I do remember what Ms. Zalaji said. I remember at other meetings, when Lou and Amy at the time were able to get in, it seemed that it was easier, it was clearer, the audio, but for some reason, the audio just sounds distorted tonight, so maybe somebody needs to check some of the adjustments or whatever the case may be, but I think we'll get through it. We got it done. It's not a perfect system, but we are allowing the opportunity for the public to call in, and we're getting it done, so thank you.
Mrs. Gilbert-Floyd, did you have something?
I just want to say, I think that between our tech department, Ms. Anaya, I think that we, at our next meeting, I'm sure, more than confident that we'll be able to come up with something that's a little bit more, maybe, fine-tuned, and just like Mr. Ireland said, I was like, there are, and I think Ms. Anaya said too, there's multiple ways that people can contact with their questions, and it would be more convenient if we could hear it, and then we wouldn't have to translate. And when Mr. Laggy said that the public, so they don't think that we're being rude, I hope that no one in the public thinks that we're potentially being rude or not trying to, sabotage the call-ins or anything like that. But I will add that I know that we do have a setup here for people to come in person. And today, we have an empty house tonight, but, that's understandable too underneath the circumstances, but.
And if the board were to entertain an option as an option, I can hear clearly when they talk to me, and I don't know if it's my message conveyed out, but that really risks a lot of the loss in translation. But we'll think about it, we'll get back to you, but I just don't know.
I'm confident
With our speaker system and the live streaming piece, if we don't want to live stream in them and just hear it in here, that might be a different avenue as well. But to hear it live streamed, for us to hear, we'll figure it out. We'll come up with something. We always do.
All right, yeah, I trust you guys to do your best and see if we can't improve things a bit. And, again, so we're extending every courtesy. So this is an in-person meeting. However, we also allow for people to not only attend in person but to watch us live stream or to watch us recorded. And if they're not in person, to call in to us to ask a question, and we're allowing board members to call in and participate. So we're offering every courtesy we possibly can. The only thing we have to try to do is make the quality of sound a little bit better if that's technically possible. So we'll do our best to do that. Sound good?
Sounds good. What we're going to do is we'll get in touch with IT, because I admit I had a very difficult time hearing, but this is where we are. This is where we are. So we will look into that. So just for clarification, being able to process things, I just want to make it clear to the public that the Executive Order 175 applies to non-public. The road back to school does not. The Executive Order 175 applies to us. The road back to school applies to us, a public school, okay? So I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Okay, anything else, board members? Mrs. Sullivan.
This is to Steve. I'm wondering if our students that might be getting a little bit behind that we're talking about with this grant, is it possible that we can use some of the Aspire grant and get students in, have classes in there that the students can, I know they have homework that they can do in there, but is there a way for us to have, as we have other classes lined up, can we line up a class for extra learning through the Aspire program also? Or,
I'll
I don't
let-
really want an answer now.
Well,
just-
it's a good idea. What I would say is that in terms of grant funds, I think that Chandra would jump in and certainly say that we wouldn't be able to, like, change that grant or amend that grant to be able to meet those needs. However, I think it's a good idea you have in the sense that Aspire and even Talons truly is about enrichment. It's not necessarily, we've moved well away from we're here just to kind of like, watch your kids. They really truly are trying to do creative things, even in a virtual environment. And I work very closely with Ms. Boyd, and those are conversations we're going to have to be able to, again, identify maybe those that are participating in those programs to be able to make sure she has the information she needs so her staff can also provide the levels of support in those programs as well. So all conversations we're having, in addition to other things that I think you'll be hearing next week as well.
And only because you brought it up, and I found out today I'm going to be adding something to the agenda next week, I will just take this opportunity to speak on it. Aspire last year was able to get additional funding through, it's a blended model between the Aspire Enrichment Program and IDEA fundings, which is special ed. So last year was $25,000. I don't recall the amount this year, but she was able to get lock-in extra funding specifically to enrich special ed children. So although the learning loss is specifically what Mr. Santilli spoke about, tier 1, tier 3, gen ed type stuff, this is not going to maybe mirror that, and we can possibly do the same for special ed through the Aspire program. So you hit the nail on the head, forward thinking. And actually, we're going to talk about it next week, but we just found out today, and it has to be board approved in January, so it'll probably be on the next agenda. You'll hear more.
Thank you. That's great.
All right, so I think we have come to the point that we are going to look for a motion to adjourn.
No.
If anyone has
We have to
anything
vote,
else?
Don't we? Finance.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. How could I forget? Yes, we have to take action on 5.2 through 5.5. May I have a motion, please?
Motion. Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on those items? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Alabarda? Yes. Ms. Byrd is not present for the vote. Mr. Delabarka?
Yes.
Mr. Ireland?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Salagi?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilbert Floyd?
Yes.
And Mr. Castellano?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have anything? Very good. So we had again, we had a productive meeting. We're back in person. We're still working on some of the bugs of a hybrid board meeting. That's not an easy thing to do. However, we are in person. And again, as Ms. Gilbert Floyd pointed out, no one is here. So that's something, we have to think about. I mean, so with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay, all in favor, we'll raise our hands. Everyone have a very good night, and we'll see you next Tuesday.